You're listening to the Modern Life Mystic Woman podcast, hosted by Jen Neville and Taiha Lee.
Modern Life Mystic Woman started as a conversation about writing, dreaming, dating, magic, God, tarot, astrology, and our mutual passion for consciously creating both spiritually fulfilling and totally luxurious lifestyles.
We're all about living in alignment, being tapped in AF, and going all in on ascension. We're committed to intuition, inspiration, and creation.
We are the bold and the spiritual, and we're moving cosmic mountains together. Hello, you guys. Welcome back to another episode. I am super stoked to share what we're going to share today, all about why you need to stop waiting for your twin flame, for your soulmate, for your person, whatever label that you want to put on it, just why you need to stop waiting. And this is something that I've personally had to work through a lot in the last little while. So I'm super stoked to, just like dive right on into it. And we're going to see how this intersects with the whole time travel, parallel lives, intersecting with other people's lives, and just how all of this ties together, and like what our journeys have been, and really kind of dive into like what our personal conversations have been about this.
Yeah, totally. I feel like we've been talking so much about this and going through our own experiences, and I feel like everybody can relate to kind of being in that energy of waiting for somebody, whether it's waiting for somebody to come back or waiting to do something. I know personally I have had my moments where I've just been like, F it, like I'm doing this myself. And it is twin flame related, like love related, but at the same time, like waiting for friends to do stuff, or waiting for somebody to do something with you, or, putting things off, putting parts of your life off because of being in the waiting energy.
Well, and as actually you're saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, this happens all the time. But it's like the collective waiting energy right now of like waiting for like quarantine to be done,
waiting for 2021 like to come.
Yeah,
because it's like waiting for 2020 to be over. I was watching something today that was like, stop wishing away, time. And I feel like we talked a little bit about this last episode, where we were talking about kind of being in this time frame of like setting a 2-week period and making sure you're not, or like the beginning, you're probably going to be counting down time, but at some point you have to hit a shift to be just in that flow state. Because it's like, this is a weird year. This is a really weird year. And like going into this year, I was like, I'm going to meet the love of my life this year. I'm going to travel the world. And that is not what happened. But instead of being like, well, this year's gone to shit, it's been like, no, we're just redirecting. We're redirecting this energy. And it's not even like 2021, I'll travel the world. It's like, I'm just going to stop making plans at this point. Just go with the flow. Yeah. But I feel like there's so many instances, and I'm like, I think I spent a lot of my last year, I think I was in such a big waiting energy, waiting for somebody to come into my life, waiting for somebody to come back, waiting to get an apology from somebody. And I know, obviously, I do these tarot readings in which I'm always talking about this energy of somebody's coming back in to apologize, somebody's coming back in to reconcile. And then I get so many comments that's like, nobody's coming. I've been waiting. Like, I've been waiting for 6 months. This reading's just bullshit at this point. And it's kind of like, I don't know what to tell you, because it happens when you're just not waiting. And it's like, that sounds so cliche, but you're either waiting. How would I put this? You're either not waiting, living your life, and it happens, or it doesn't happen and it doesn't matter because you kind of moved on and you're out living your life. So much easier said than done, though. So much easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, what I kind of realized, like, and I was, had been in this situation for a while where I felt like I was like waiting for this person to kind of make a decision specifically on like where he was going to live so that we could either move forward or not, kind of thing. And what I realized was like, by me being in that waiting energy,
Mm-hmm.
that was being mirrored back to me in like a stagnant energy.
Yeah.
And so it was like, you know, and when I was describing this whole situation to you, what really shifted things was when you're like, yeah, like if two people are really going like on a parallel path and you're meant to intersect at like a certain time,
Mm-hmm.
well then like you got to keep up. And so, and
Yeah.
especially if you're mirroring each other, whether twin flame, soulmate, just anybody, like we're all mirroring each other. If you're waiting, like of course it's going to mirror back on that other side of this like sense of stagnancy. And
Yeah.
I think if part of the twin flame work that we're here to do is in a way like hold each other accountable to like our soul's purpose,
Mm-hmm.
then like we have to maintain the momentum in order for them to like get out of that stagnant energy. And you're not gonna ever intersect if you keep waiting, because it's like
Yeah.
I just loved the way like you painted that picture for me, because I was like, oh, it just feels so much more like, yeah, okay, just, and it really is like the whole like manifesting thing, law of attraction, just like focus on yourself, focus on your own path, like
Yeah.
who's meant for you will show up. um but I
And
love how we've talked about like the timelines and the time travel and the mirroring, and I think that adds a whole other layer to this.
totally. And not even like getting out of this concept of twin flame and this person is my twin flame. I had an experience last year in which I had manifested this man, and it was like my year of yes, where I was going to say yes to more spontaneous adventures. So of course I flew across the country to meet somebody for the first time. Online, and I had all these high expectations, and I was so down about myself, down after, and this was probably in March. So I had set a bunch of January things where I was like, okay, I want to travel more. I want to go to Europe this year. I want to, because I had set an intention for myself like the August beforehand. I was like, I'm going to go back to Paris and I'm going to stay there for like a month. And I had set all these intentions, and I met this guy, started talking to this guy, flew out, and then like all of a sudden my whole life changed to like, I want to make this relationship work, and it just crumbled in front of me, and I was just kind of like so disappointed. And I spent months in this energy of like, is this person going to come back into my life? Is this person going to apologize to me? Is this person going to do this for me? And I mean, when I say I wasted months, I wasted these months
Mm-hmm.
because I was not in a good energy. I was kind of not present with myself, which I think that's such a huge thing, is like when we're kind of in that waiting energy, we're really not present with ourselves. And then I had reread Eat, Pray, Love, because I was like, I feel like a calling to that book. I love that book. And I had this moment where I was like, gosh, this is what I wanted. I wanted to do a Europe trip. I wanted to pick up and leave somewhere. So I was like, all you have to do is book your ticket. Just book your ticket and then you're in. Like you have to go. I bought the travel insurance because I wanted, the insurance to like, if I want to not go. So I booked my trip to Italy. I had like, was going to do a month in Italy, really immerse myself. It made me laugh because I ended up doing like 2 months, but it worked itself out to where I was in Paris, which was my original intention, was to be in Paris. So I never went to Italy. I had to go to Paris, and then I kind of did like a little Spain thing. But it was this big thing of like, nobody was going to go with me. Nobody had the time. And for a while, I was like trying to convince my friends, let's go to Europe. Let's go to Europe. And then I kind of was like, you know what? Screw it. Like, I need to go by myself. So I booked the trip. I went by myself, I was wanting this life-changing experience. But again, I think the main thing I learned on that trip was like, gosh, I'm always waiting for something. I'm always waiting for
Mm.
something that I can't even be here on this trip and enjoy it, because I'm like waiting for the man of my dreams to walk in, or I'm waiting for this experience, that I can't just sit and enjoy and be grateful for the life that I'm living right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was the shift that I needed on that trip, to where I really catch myself in this waiting energy now. And I'm just like, nope, like go on a 2-hour drive, go here, do this, like just, get moving. And looking back in hindsight, if we're doing like time travel stuff, I realized the importance of me flying to see that guy had nothing to do with that relationship, and everything to do with the fact that, like, that's huge. I got on a plane, flew to meet somebody I'd never met before in my life and stay with them for 5 days. And I feel like if you can do that, like I can show up to anything, or I can have the
Mm.
courage to do anything. So it was kind of like, that's what that connection taught me. And then I kind of like further jumped off the cliff with the Europe trip, because I was like, this is something I've wanted to do my whole life. Why do I have to wait? Like, why do I have to wait? I can do it now. Why do I need to wait? Thank God I did it, because if I would have waited till 2020, no shot.
Yeah, no kidding, actually.
Yeah. So it's like it all
You're really
happened.
inspiring me right now to book a trip to Paris.
I know, right? You should. Oh my God. Paris, you kind of, I think, like have to do it alone at least once. Girl,
Oh yeah, that's my
if you
intention. I
go to
just like,
Paris, like,
but then
don't
I
tell
want you
me,
to
because
come join me. Like,
I'll come join. You don't even have to go alone. I've got connects.
yeah. And I love that you mentioned too, like your intention was also to travel. So like even, connecting with that guy
Yeah.
and traveling to see him, it was kind of like you're also getting that intention met
Oh,
as well to
totally.
travel.
It was totally an intention. Um, it was just an experience. And it's like sometimes when you're in the moment, you can't see the big picture. And that's like, but you have to keep moving in order to get to that big picture view. Because now I'm like, okay, I booked a trip for myself now, and I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. But again, it's like the stop waiting thing. Like
Yeah.
I mean, we're really limited here. I booked a trip to um, Sedona in Arizona. I can't travel. I was supposed to go to Vancouver, but I can't go to Vancouver.
Mm.
And it's funny because, yeah, this year I had booked way more solo trips. Like I was supposed to go to Eastern Europe, and they all it all got kind of canceled. So this has been kind of a weird year for me, especially with the intentions I had set. But it's like just re-navigating. That's why
Yeah.
it's so important. Like we always talk about being in this feminine flow. It's so important to kind of go with the flow. And it's like if somebody's removed themselves from your life, like you have to provide space. You have to
Yeah.
provide space for them to go whatever they need to go through. And let me tell you what, I spent months hung up on that guy. And then by the time I had finally like gone to Europe, made these moves, I came back from Europe, met somebody new. Um, like met a couple new people because I came back from Europe and I had shifted out of that energy, and I was just in this like, I want to date and I want to meet people and I want to get to learn myself through dating, instead of just like placing these ideals on people,
Mm-hmm.
And it's about kind of doing the work in that sense. It's, again, with the big picture, it seems like it's so important to get that person to come back into your life. But at what point do you just say, I need to let go and just enjoy my life? And if they come back, great. If they don't, maybe somebody better is out there for me.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the whole waiting energy actually takes you out of the feminine energy. Because
Yeah.
that's what's so magnetic about the feminine is just like her taking care of herself, her like being creatively self-expressed and like
Mm-hmm.
not waiting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like when we can, and that was the crazy thing for me to realize as soon as I recognized that I had actually been in this like waiting, holding pattern for years. Like it was just
Yeah.
that this person showed up and like was mirroring it back to me like in a new way. And when I realized, I was like, oh my God, like I've actually had a history of being in this energy,
Mhm.
and this person is showing up to like help like set me free in a way of kind of like not letting me wait in a way. Like
Yeah.
he just kind of refused to be like, no, like don't wait kind of thing. And then
Yeah.
it was crazy because then as soon as I shifted my energy around it and decided to like set a firm boundary of like, yeah, like I'm not waiting for this. And
Mhm.
then boom, like a couple days later, like that's when he shows up. And so it's
Yeah.
like it is just all in like our energy and like and seeing I think that's the thing as like we're ascending, and whether that's twin flame relationships or whatever they are, I think these people are, if you've really done the work and you are committed to the work, and the people that show up in your life, they are here to like hold you accountable to like your soul's growth. And that's really what it felt like in that connection for me, was like, and I was kind of, it was like this weird energetic telepathic kind of thing I was experiencing, almost like he was kind of like, you're almost there, you're almost there, you're almost
Yeah.
there. And finally when it clicked and I was like made this boundary, it was like I could finally be set free, and then you can actually move forward with the connection like with integrity, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's also like that, if somebody's aligned on your path, if somebody's like, destined to be there, and that's where you have to really trust in the universe. You have to like give it to let go and let God. That's what I say to people. I'm like,
Yeah.
let go and let God. I have one of the hardest times letting go and let God, but I really have worked on that with myself, of kind of like making life my own adventure. And sometimes I feel like when these things happen, it's really reflecting something that we need to focus on in ourselves. Because like, say in like a present situation of mine, not present because, well, they're gone, but somebody's kind of pushed back from my life, and I could be in an energy of like, what's going on? Why aren't they talking to me? Why has this happened? Why are they out of my life? And instead I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give it to God, because at the end of the day, if this person's meant for me, they'll come back into my life. But obviously, if like there's something going on here where I'm obsessing over the fact that like, why isn't this person in my life? It's symbolizing like something that's like an energetic minimum of mine that I need to raise,
Mm.
right? Because it's like, what about me wants that person who, like, if that person were to come back into my life, they better come back differently. But also, everybody's a mirror, right? So I need to level myself up. And it's like,
Yeah.
either I level myself up and I'm going to magnetize somebody who's at that level as well. And I feel like that's when you do so much work, when you do so much energy work, you know that. You just know that. And I know, I'm like, hey, kind of like how we said last week, 2 weeks of really working on yourself. I bet you magnetize, you either move on from it, you either move on, you're not even going to care about it, or you're going to magnetize somebody who's at that new level that you've reached. And that's like, if you're calling in people, like, that's why you can't focus on a specific person.
Yeah.
You just have to focus your energy towards yourself. Like, that's a lot of the no waiting. Because it's like, people might be listening to this and they're like, well, what do you mean no waiting? Like, I can't book a trip to Europe, I can't do this right now, I can't do that. It's like, the first few days are going to be hard, but the
Mm-hmm.
more you kind of focus on you and make this like set intentions for yourself, versus like, I want this person to come back into my life, you're going to be able to magnetize somebody who maybe your person, maybe your twin flame is at a much higher level than this person you're
Yeah.
trying to call back in. Maybe you get like,
Totally.
that's the other thing. It's like the universe, God, I always refer to it as the universe, But God's idea for you might be way better than what you could even imagine, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to like think big, like dream big.
Yeah. Well, I remember like watching one of Phil Good's videos. This was quite a while back, but he was talking about how like our purpose, like we're all here to expand, to really like expand as much as we can, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're thinking about someone from the past or like anything, like whatever, your guides, your angels, God, your own spirit, your own subconscious, like will not allow you to connect with someone who is going to like inhibit your expansion. So even maybe
Mm-hmm.
like, he uses an example, which similar thing that happened to me, like connecting with someone and then moving to new cities where then you're both living in the same city and you're still not connecting. Well,
Yeah.
there's a reason for that. Like there's a reason, like your guides or whatever are literally keeping you apart because that connecting with that person is not in alignment with your ultimate
Yeah.
expansion. And when I kind of realized that, I was like, oh, that's freeing. Like, because, and that kind of in my own situation, like I had connected with this guy over 10 years ago. I was still thinking about him.
Yeah.
Now, like 10 years later, we're finally living in the same city and like still, no, like did not
No, yeah.
connect. And so I was thinking about how like, okay, like maybe I had this feeling with him that is something I would like to embody or have in my life. But like, for example, I've up leveled in all these other areas, like specifically, let's say like materially, like I have
Yeah.
like very high material kind of standards of the way I want to live and the way that I need to live to feel like fully self-expressed and safe and everything. And so if this person from the past, if they're not at that level, then you're never going to match up because you're tuned into two totally different radio stations. Like you're totally on two
Oh,
different
totally.
vibes,
Frequencies.
right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to really look at how much work you've done on yourself. If you've hung up on someone still in the past and be like, yeah, no, like that is not part of my ultimate expansion. And I have
Yeah.
no idea where they are energetically. And like,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah. I actually love that terminology, like frequencies, because I have this like theory of how it works. And it's kind of in relation to um, that like we emit frequencies as like human beings. We emit frequencies, and there's these different radio stations, kind of like how you say. And it's so interesting to me because the guy that I flew out to see, I even equate it to this. I had made it was like Valentine's Day. I remember, I'll never forget. I had made this like it was 11:11, and I always make wishes at 11:11, and there was just like a lot of emotion backing this one because I was kind of like in this energy of just being tired of Tampa, and I kind of made this wish. I was like, I really want to um I really want somebody who like doesn't live here. I want to be able to travel to go see someone. um I want that kind of like I want something new, something that I can travel towards, or somebody that just doesn't live here. And it was like I was on this energetic frequency, and like within 2 days, like this guy had messaged me, or we had like matched on Hinge or whatever because he was in town for a wedding. And I swear, this like I just think he was on that frequency. It was like that radio channel. So our frequencies had kind of aligned in this way, because then what had happened, within 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I was flying to across the country to meet this guy. So it was kind of like our just frequencies, we were on that same radio station. And it's
yeah,
kind of like when you tap into these different frequencies, and I think that's like the beauty of kind of life, is like we can kind of manipulate our energy. We can really manifest what it is that we want. If you really want that person, like, but if you're on this past wavelength, past frequency, That's one thing we haven't figured out how to do, how to bring the past to the present. And there's like, really, the past is the past for a reason, I think. Um, so when we're on that radio station, we're not able to tap into these other kind of frequencies, you know? We're not
Yeah.
able to call in these other things because we're on this, like, it's like the intersection thing. We're not catching up. So
Yeah.
that person, that past person that you're trying to reconnect with, they're on a different radio station.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of, you know, put it on tune, like feel it out. Find like
Yeah.
different wavelengths, you know?
And
Test
really,
out.
like, you're not today who you were in the past, you know? And so if I think
Exactly.
if you like, you are really committed to your ascension and your evolution and getting better and better and better, like, yeah, that's the thing. Like, we can only see things from our limited human
Mm-hmm.
perspective. Like, God has so much more in store for us than we could ever imagine. Like, we don't even fully know what's possible. Like, we have a vision of what we want, but like, what if it could be even better than that? But we're still hung
Exactly.
up on something from the past. And it's like, and I'm just thinking, like, what if you started to think about, like, what if you're actually like slowing down the evolution of like all of humanity by obsessing, like any of us, right? Like
Yeah,
all
any
of
of
us.
us. Yeah.
And it's like, if you were really committed to like, yeah, focusing on yourself, but also like, we all want to like move humanity forward. And like, what if us being hung up on something from the past is slowing
Yeah.
everything down?
It's just so interesting to me. And that's kind of like, it's about the big picture. We can't see the big picture. And that's, I think we have these innate sense of feelings, because even for me, it's like, okay, that YouTube thing was such a hard pull for me. And the guy that I thought was my twin flame, I'm open to other options. I always say that. I just don't, it doesn't resonate with me anymore that he's my twin flame. I think he's like somebody who's really destined to be in my life, but not my twin flame. Um, Please God. So it's like, I think that when I was kind of really, really focused on that being my person, I was kind of in that energy of like, I had no career going. I was kind of up in the air, like not as successful and as stable as I want to be. And he was pretty successful. And I was kind of wanting that like provider type of person. And I was like, why would anybody ever want to provide to me? Like, I don't even have structure. Like, I don't have any way of showing, like, hey, give me your money because I'm going to help maximize it. Even if
Yeah.
I feel that way, it's like my outside world does not reflect that, because I'm just sitting here dipping into my savings account, saving, saving, saving. So I kind of had set an intention. I was like, you know what? I need to get my career together before I can even call in this guy that I want, who's going to be successful and who's going to be a provider. And then I kind of started the YouTube, and it's so interesting because it's really took off. So I knew that was like right away, that was the right move. The YouTube took off. Now I'm in such a different space of where I'm like stable, providing for myself. And I actually emit like the energy of like, I know how to make money, and I know how to like, you know, innovate new
Yeah.
ideas and create, and I know how to, just produce.
Yeah.
Turn lead into gold. I know how to alchemize now.
Right. I love how you're talking about this, because that's one thing I wanted to mention before. As we like up the value, that was one of the prompts actually that I was doing about the full moon thing this morning, was something that's shifted for me or evolved is like how much I value myself.
Yeah.
And just with what you're saying, especially like if we do want that more like masculine, successful, wealthy kind of like King of Pentacles
Yeah.
man vibe, then it's like, I just love how you said everything, because it's like, yeah, like I want to be seen as that, like, I know how to like invest money. I know how to like multiply money. I know how to like, I can be trusted with
Yeah.
that. And same thing that you're saying. It's like, you know, like a couple years ago, even a year ago, like I wasn't at the place that I am now. And now it's like, look at what we're doing. And it's like,
Yeah.
I feel so much more confident in that. And then the value that we see and feel in ourselves, now that's what's going to be mirrored back to us in like,
Totally. But for the women who are out there killing it, because I know we got some women, like a lot of like strong, successful, like female entrepreneurs listening to us. For those women, like realize that if a man is going to show up like in your energy and your presence, and you're already doing these things, you're already feeling this way about yourself, and he's not fully aligned with his like ability to provide and his ability to be confident with money, he will be repelled by that energy, because it's going to, like, he won't be able to be in that energy field, which is not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on like, that's, and I guess that goes into say like that intimidation factor. When women are like, oh, I'm too intimidating. I don't think it's really intimidating. I just think like, I know my energy presents itself as, I know how to make money. I know how to create the life for myself that I want. I'm going to add this value to your life. But, and I don't even need to communicate this. My energy just speaks for itself.
yeah.
But you're going to have to really be on your shit. Like, you're going to have to be able to provide for me. You're going to have to be able to create a space, because I don't want somebody. So like the table kind of flipped. It's like, I don't want somebody who doesn't know how to manage money, who doesn't know how to make money, who doesn't know how to, provide, because I already do that for myself. So why would I bring in somebody who is not going to match that energy, So I feel like there's a lot of men who come into my life who either they see that and they're kind of like, oh shit, like, and like when they do that separation mode, it's because they're in this energy of like, they have to figure that out on themselves, and you kind of have to let them.
Totally. I love that you're saying that. And like, when I came to you for a reading, you said that exact thing to me about like, you appear to this person like you've got like, your shit together and you've got this and that. And,
Yeah.
and I think that ties into the whole, like, why you can't wait, because like, and the masculine, like they want to like appear as that like masculine provider and everything. And it's like, if they can't meet you there, well then they're gonna like take a step back, because like they don't want to disappoint you. And so again, it's the whole like, if you're hung up on somebody and they haven't met you yet, it's like there's so many factors to be considered. It's not just like, do they like you or do they not? It's like
exactly. Well, and it's also thinking about everything we're saying about, showing up like this person, kind of how I said, like, I wanted this man who's going to provide for me, who's going to do all these things for me. Guys do the same thing. Men do the same thing. They want a woman who's independent. And even taking this out of like man, woman, it's like masculine, feminine, because you can be in the same partner relationship. You can be, but whatever your goal is. For me, it's like, yes, I'm going to always provide for myself. I'm always going to have my own things, but I do want an energy from a man who's going to be supportive, who's going to encourage growth, who's going to add some kind of value to my life, because I'm adding a hell of a lot of value to yours. And it's kind of like, I had to work on getting myself to where, my energy speaks for itself in that way, in which I believe these things that I'm saying, versus kind of showing up like, hey, I'm draining my savings account, but I'm going to add value to your life. Like, and it's kind of like, you have to kind of, that's what doing the work is. It's building this confidence. And of course, men want women who add value to their life. Of course they want that. But when they're confronted with that woman and they haven't done the work on themselves, they're going to be in for a rude awakening, because, that's not the woman you can play games with. That's not the woman you can manipulate. That's the woman that's going to make you be like, oh, I need to step my shit up if I want someone like this in my life. So a lot of times, yeah,
Yeah.
they will repel from your energy. And then it's depending on, do they want to do the work or not? Everybody has free will.
Yeah.
Because then they could play this little game with themselves where they're like, that was a nightmare. I'm going to go choose somebody who is a little bit more in my comfort zone.
Yeah. And which is totally fine. Like
Totally
there's a
fine.
match for everybody. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. Is like, we can't take that personally.
Can't.
If, you know, if they're not at that level, like.
Yeah. And it's kind of like me being self-employed, me doing the YouTube stuff. How do I know? Like, I just have to keep striving to be the best version of myself. And then the person that I'm going to magnetize in is going to mirror that. They're going to be the best version of themselves. If I'm magnetizing somebody who's broken and triggering me, that means I still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, totally.
So it's like about being kind of honest with yourself all the time. It's hard. It's a tough journey.
It's a lot of work.
That's why they call it work.
Yeah.
That's why they call it work, because it's hard work.
Well, okay, I think this is a good point in the conversation to talk about like the structure, the schedule of relationships that we kind of want and that we're calling in, because that feels really present for me and something we've been kind of talking about. And it's like, you know, as I've spent basically a full year in pretty much isolation, like way out, dated a little bit in between, but just recently like had like an experience where I was like with a man for like a full week.
Yeah.
And that was the most, and that was kind of referencing my whole like microdosing on social stuff, because especially with the whole quarantine thing, we've been spending so much time by ourselves. And I think like it's turning like all of our abilities up. I know for me, like, you know, like my intuition is higher, like my abilities are like more tapped in, because you're just spending a lot more time, if that's your intention, which I think a lot of the, you know, women listening to this, that's their intention.
Yeah.
And one of the things like I really had to tap into was like, okay, like what is the container of this ideal relationship that I'm calling in, you know, like how often do I want to see somebody? Like how often do I need space to myself to do my magic and be in my own energy? And I think that's something that we have to have an intention for, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's even what I was saying. Like, you don't want to burn the candle too fast. I mean, and this is like, I'm super into like the passionate, like, I can't live without you type of relationships. But then I kind of was reflecting on that and I'm like, man, those are a lot of fun, but they never last. And it's because it's too much too soon. And yeah, there has to be this element of like slow buildup. So yeah, setting out a schedule, like my weekend lover, and then maybe after a couple weekends together, we start seeing each other on Wednesday. And because if not, I know I let myself get too consumed in relationships, and then it's like nothing else exists in the world. But yeah, it's so funny to me because I'm like thinking about that whole like 40 years thing. And this is coming from like a girl who all of like my really close friendships I've had for 20 plus years, 25 years now. So I have friends in my life who have been in my life for upwards of 20 years. And it's like, so I like laugh at myself when I try to act like, oh yeah, I'm, you know, not into like the long-term stuff. But then I'm like, no, I am, because like I make it work with my friendships. Like I've had friends for 20 years and we've been up and down. And I think like, you know, gosh, that's the other thing is like we put so much emphasis on this romantic relationship that sometimes we lose sight of these incredible friendships we have and these learning experiences we have in our work relationships and our friendships that can kind of migrate into the romantic, because it's like both of us love that quote, well, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's like even catching myself saying like, oh, after 20 years, I'd be sick of somebody. I'm like, that's not true. I guess not, because I have friends who I've had for longer than 20 years. and I'm not sick
Yeah.
of them. Some of them, like, we check back in with each other, or we go through like a couple months where we're like, hey, we need a break from each other. But that's what relationships are. It's work. So even evaluate, how are you in your friendships? Are you quick to cut people off? Are you, because it's like, what type of relationship are you trying to manifest? Are you happily ever after?
Mm.
Or is it like, are you like, and then you want to manifest that kind of relationship, but then look at some of your friendships. And I'm not saying let people walk all over you, let people betray you, but it's like, when somebody starts acting a certain way, are you the type to be like, I'm not dealing with this, goodbye? Or are you the type to work through it?
Totally.
You know?
Yeah. And that also just makes me think too of like, setting your intentions for the relationship that you want. Like, if you're like me and Jen and you really like your independence and your solo time, we're both only children, so that's pretty natural for us, and like have our own businesses, like, and love to travel. Like the thing that sparked in my mind as you were talking about that is like, are you manifesting a relationship where like you want to build in time that's for like solo travel? Like for me, I know that's going to be a priority. Like I want to travel a lot with my lover, but I also know I'm going to need to like, I love traveling on my own too,
Yeah.
and I want to like build that into the relationship.
No, I think that's definitely part of like, and I have a friend who, her mom, she's married, and she'll pack up her stuff, and for 2 months out of the year she goes to Paris and she just lives in Paris. And
I
I'm like,
love
oh my
that.
God, that's amazing. And I always
Yeah.
tell, like, um I feel like solo travel is so big for me that I'll always want to do that. But I would love like somebody that I can travel with, that I can kind of have these fun adventures with, but even friendships too. Like, I want to have girl trips.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I don't know, we have this ability to design what we want, but it's so important to be reflective of your external, and as your external, and that can get you out of the waiting energy right there of just like, first, before you can call in that person, make the environment for that person to live in,
Yeah,
like, you have to
absolutely.
create the environment,
Yeah.
because if not, they're going to show up and they're going to be like, this isn't for me.
Right. Well, and
Or they won't even be able to
physically,
come
and
in. Yeah.
yeah, like how can you make time in your, so the first thing when you said that, I was like, oh, like feng shui, like how can you feng shui like your bedroom for like
Yeah.
actually making space for the person? And then I was thinking like, how can you make space in your schedule? So like, even say you have your own business, and like, this is something that I had to really implement like a couple months back, because I was just kind of like working whenever, and I was like,
Yeah.
can I really want to just take weekends off? Like I want to be like a regular person who
Mm-hmm.
like has a schedule and I take certain days off. And even that, it's like, if you're not doing that yet, well, then you're still not creating the space for the
Yeah.
person to come in.
That's so true. And that's kind of a revelation I had too, is like, I don't want to work on weekends anymore. I'm going to work during the weekdays like a regular person, and then have my weekends free. And, some weekends I'll stay home and I'll be like, I want to work this weekend. But it's like
Totally.
being lit up, and it's like, okay, I want to get some work done. I want to get ahead of myself so that I have, like, I'm going to go on a trip next week. So I want to get ahead of myself. But yeah, it's kind of creating that schedule, creating that environment. Kind of by the time Thursday rolls around, that's when I start incorporating social stuff back into my schedule. Not that, but it's like also being open and flowing. But yeah, it's kind of creating that environment for the person that you want. And then like Monday rolls around and I have that boundary on, like, I have to get to work, you
And then you
know?
actually feel, I think it stimulates both sides, this desire to work and be in that creative
Yeah,
flow.
creative flow.
Because then it's like, okay, I've given myself whatever, like 2 or 3 days off or whatever. Like now I'm actually inspired to go back to work and do
Yeah,
whatever on Monday because
exactly.
yeah.
But that's another thing, is like having that boundary. That's another thing I had to learn, is because I could easily, if I'm not strict with myself on my schedule, and like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are my heavy filming days. Those are my days where I'm filming. Those are those days. By Thursday and Friday I can like teeter off. Then like some man comes into my life, I get swept away by it, and I'm like, well, I can push it to Tuesday, I can push it to Wednesday. No, it's having that strict boundary of like Monday from 9 to 12, you're gonna have to make yourself scarce. Like I need to film these videos. And like that's the beauty of kind of, I wake up early because I'm more energetic in the morning, and I'll be done by like 12 to 1. So I have the rest of the day to kind of do all my other stuff. But like I made a commitment, again, like how you do one thing is how you do another, everything. I made a commitment to whoever's watching these videos. I owe these people commitment of these videos are going to get out at this time. And like, you have to be able to honor your commitments. You have to be able to honor kind of what it is that you're saying that you're going to do. And it's like, how many of us want to call in a man who is reliable, who is committed? Right. But what if you're not even committed to being like, this week I'm going to take a break?
I love that you're saying that, because that's a big thing that I had to work through this whole situation, was like realizing like, fuck, like I want a man who's really reliable, who like says what he means what he says, shows up when he says he's going to. And of course I had to like look in the mirror and look at like, where am I not being as reliable as I want to be? Where am I not like really holding myself as accountable? Like, again, just doing all that inner work and being able to see that. And then again, okay, how can I give myself that so I'm not putting pressure on another person to give that? And then the more I embody it, of course, then it's going to show up in my reality. Yeah.
And it's that letting your energy speak for itself. If anything's going to fall out, because even I had last week with, I've been working a lot with boundaries, and also like, I feel inconsistent sometimes, but I think we did a session where I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm actually really consistent. I've always been really consistent and really committed. Like even when I played golf, I was committed to my schedule, my routine. I'm not big on other people's structures, but I'm very like, if I made a commitment to these people who pay a monthly subscription to me, these readings, everybody who's subscribed to me, these readings are getting out. These readings have to get out. I made that commitment. I can't just decide, you know what, this week I feel like shit, so I'm not going to do it. Yeah. No, that's not how that works. And it's like, man, is it too much for me to ask that I want a man who's consistent? I want somebody who's consistent with their energy that they give to me. And it's like, I provide consistency and reliability in my own life, and to the people that I'm in exchange with. No, that's not too much to ask for. The boundary, and when I become inconsistent is when I allow the energy of somebody who's inconsistent to come in and out of my life. Yeah. And that's setting a hard boundary and being like, hey, like you can't show up like this. So it's even like these energies that are in and out, like that Knight of Wands energy who comes in and out. It's like, no, because then I let that person back in and they show up inconsistently. And then it makes me inconsistent because here I am letting this person's inconsistency affect my consistency. Yeah. So it's kind of like taking that and I don't know. I've been working a lot around that too. And setting the boundary of like, no, you have to be consistent with yourself, like, and not let inconsistent people into your life. Like that should be a consistency. Yeah. I love that. So it's like, there's a lot.
It takes a lot of practice, and you have to be committed to the practice of it though. It's like every conversation that comes up, or when that person does come back again, it's like, it's recognizing like, okay, this is a pattern. This is an opportunity to do things differently. And that's why I'm so big on communication and like, helping women become more confident in their communication and setting boundaries, because it doesn't really just happen off most times in one conversation, though it can, but it's more like it's building the muscle, right? It's like
Yeah.
you don't just go to a golf tournament and never have practiced. You don't just go
Yeah.
run a marathon the first time. It's like these consistent small conversations and opportunities that we get to have to like build up the strength. And then finally, it's like our energy field is just like, no, like, I don't take shit. Like these
Yeah.
are, people don't treat me like that. Like that's not something that's conducive. That's not something that I respond to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
that's kind
that's,
of where I had that breakthrough, was where I was thinking, and I'm like, I'm so consistent. I'm so committed. I don't deserve this. And then I was like, oh, but here's the gap. I'm not committed and consistent with myself because I'm allowing somebody's inconsistency to affect me.
yeah, I
And
remember that part like in your session and where it was like, you're like, I really want to work on my boundaries, I guess. I guess that's what that is. And so, and this is like a process that I love because I was like, okay, well, where in your life are you really good at boundaries? And how can
mm-hmm.
we piggyback that energy to bring it into this? And then, yeah, you were kind of like, well, what do you like? What's an example? And then I was like, okay, for an example, like I don't do sessions before noon. And then
Yeah.
that just opened up the door for you where you're like, oh yeah, okay, like no, like boom, 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 all these things about the way you structure your business and how you're just so on it. And like you have no problem saying no to readings if you don't have the energy, and just like the way you structure everything. And it was like, see how amazing you are with your energetic boundaries in this area. Like, how can you literally just like bring that energy into like
Yeah.
relationships?
Yeah. And that's kind of where I was at. And this was around the full moon, obviously, because I was like, okay, here I am. I'll have a really great week. And then, like, what's the catch? Like, why is it that I fall back into this slump? And I was like, oh, it's because in all this work around consistency and commitments and boundaries, I'm not setting the most important energetic boundary about who I'm letting into my energy field. And
Yeah.
I do think there's like how you're saying about the communication, that's so important, because say the next time this person comes into my life, I'm 100% going to communicate that, like, hey, I would like it if you were a little bit more consistent. And if that's like not something that's can happen here, then, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like setting that boundary. We'll
And
cross
that's
that.
where that's where I kind of think like soul contracts come in, because it's like
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's those people that we have a contract with to come into our life to trigger us in that way, to force us to become better
Yeah.
communicators.
I think that this person is forcing me to set boundaries. Like that's their soul contract, because I'm
Right?
just like, oh my goodness, the things that I've encountered, I'm just like, never in my life, never
Yeah.
in my life would I attracted somebody like this, like magnetized somebody like this, or thought that it was okay to be with somebody like this, to where I'm kind of like, oh, you got to do some work, sister. Like, we got to raise this
Right?
vibe. Like, we got to set some higher boundaries, because we've come too far. We've come too far to
Yeah.
be attracting this.
It's so fun. I love that you're saying this, because like the same thing happened like, you know, within the last couple months, like in my business with like a client that I attracted. And it was this, I was kind of experiencing the same thing in like in a business relationship and in
Mm-hmm.
a romantic relationship. And just how you said that, it was like, no, 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 like we've come way too far. But then it's
Yeah.
also like, oh, this is showing me an area in my business where my boundaries are still loose, or like I don't have things as clear as they need to be. Like all these things are showing us where
Yeah.
we need to like raise the bar in our, whether it's
Yeah.
business or romance.
Totally. And it's like sometimes people just prep us for that relationship that we really want, because it's kind of like, if I don't set the boundaries now with this,
It's
I
just going to manifest in the next person.
yeah, it's just going to manifest in the next person. And it was kind of one of those moments where I was like, oh my, oh my, like like I have never experienced this before, and here I am just like allowing this person to behave in this way. And I was just
Yeah.
kind of like, no, like you've come too far. But that's why I say there's relationships that are meant to be contrast, to show us like, oh, this is not what I like.
I like how it almost sounded like you just said revelationships.
Relationships. This is a relationship. This is a relationship.
Right?
Gosh, it's like I like that term too,
Yeah.
relationship, because
And I think it's okay. Like one of the things I had to say when I like had to set this boundary and like stop waiting was to tell the person like, okay, like the container that this has been so far is expired. Like
yeah,
literally using those words, like it is expired, it's done. Like I'm not available for this in the way it has been anymore. And like I'm opting out until it can be what it needs to be, you know? And like
yeah,
you get to have those conversations, like you get to communicate, but you have to also be really tuned in with yourself and like meditative, like, okay, if you're feeling triggered about something, it's like, okay, what is going on inside of me? Why doesn't this feel good? Because, you
yeah.
know, maybe
Well, and
you
you don't
had
want
set,
to say kind of like how you say it, it's great. You don't want to come from that place, which is even like what I was going to say earlier was I'm going to cross that bridge when I get there. But at this point, I shouldn't communicate anything because I would be communicating from a wounded place and a triggered
mm-hmm,
place, which will only create another wounded situation.
totally.
So it's like really choosing your words from a place of love, like, especially when I'm saying, like, I love how you put it, like, this container has expired. Like, you know, not setting my boundaries. Because if I just say, hey, you're really inconsistent, and I think that's like, I deserve
Yeah.
better than consistency, it's like, you
Because
should
then you're
let
like making him wrong and like
and
it's not
me
even
kind
really,
of, yeah. And
and
instead
it's,
it should be my energy that just speaks for itself, like, oh, this isn't going to fly with me anymore. Because if it were
yeah,
true, then if he showed up again, one, he's not going to show up again being inconsistent. And if he
yeah,
shows up again inconsistently, my energy should just be like, oh, we're not even going to respond to this person.
exactly.
We're not even
Yeah,
going to allow this person to communicate. But that's the thing. If you've done the work, that man won't show up inconsistently. If he's meant to come back into my
totally.
life, he will not show up inconsistently. He will show up like, you know, matching my energy of being like, and that's when those apologies come in, or those manifest, like those people coming back, the reconciliations happen, because it's like your energy is in such a vibration or frequency that if this person has been doing the work on themselves, they'll come back in and be like, oh, I should have never treated you the way I treated you. And
Mm-hmm.
that does happen. And then
Yeah,
from there, it's like you get to decide, you
yeah,
know? And that's
exactly.
where you set the new container where you're like, okay, if we're going to do this again, you better, you better bring it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. You have to, if you really want to like live with an open heart, which is our job as the feminine, to keep our
Yeah.
heart open even when it's really hard, you have to have some boundaries. That's why like there's fences around houses, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can feel like safe and but you have to like yeah, like do that for yourself and not expect the other person to just like
Yeah. To
yeah.
all the, I mean, yeah, it's only us. It's only ever us. It really is. Every time I'm like, this person, I'm like, no, it's you.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah. That's why, like, I think in this past situation, so, like, the person I was dealing with, they were like, you just deflect everything. I was like, oh my goodness. I was going crazy because I'm like, oh, and I was like, wow, this is triggering me so much, because I was like, wow, I do so much work on myself that, you know, and I think that's kind of where we chatted about it in our session, because I was like, oh, I need to set boundaries. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my issue is that I need higher boundaries, because, you know, nobody's going to, I can't let people come in and tell me, you know, and I think that's a message for all women,
Yeah.
especially in like, you know, like if somebody were to say that, like, you're wrong, you're doing this, at what point do you get to just be you and be your wounded self? You know, that's where the boundary
Exactly.
comes in. just because somebody's telling you like, hey, you're triggering me, that's their job to fix.
Yeah.
And that's where I get like upset. Like my mother will listen to this, but sometimes like when I say something to her, she'll be like, that's your problem. You need to figure out why that's triggering you. And I'm just like, if I were to say that back to her, she would be so angry. But then I'm like, oh, boundaries. Or just like how she's setting a hard boundary with me. She's like, if I act that way and you have a problem with it, that's what it is, your problem. So that's where we have to get with men. But when we're so dependent on these relationships, we allow people to come into our life and tell us things and then be like, oh, yeah, I guess like, oh, I guess I do this wrong, or I did. No. At what point, like, do they have to do the work too?
Totally.
Like, you can't just be changing yourself all willy-nilly for another person.
And I think you keep, and you keep refining the process. Like, I'm just even thinking something for myself right now that's like where I can kind of set a new boundary of just like, certain things, like I don't really need to hear about certain things. Like that's kind of my next level of boundaries, where I think because I'm so in integrity, I'm really honest, I do tend to attract like kind of almost radical honesty from men.
Oh my God, I do too.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, you could have left out that detail. Like that's not really conducive to like, not, that doesn't make me feel good. Like I get you're just trying to be honest, but like, and I think that's my next level of communication is like,
that's actually kind of mine too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that too. I attract these like really honest men, tell me a lot about their past relationships, and I'm like, ooh, you know what? I don't need to know about this.
Right? Like, yeah, I don't
have to talk about the past. I'll keep that in my diary. You keep that in yours.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, I feel like this was such a good one.
Totally.
And yeah, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode and that you will tune in for the next one. And if you don't already, make sure to follow us on Instagram at Modern Life Mystic Woman. And yeah, we will see you guys next time.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow us over on Instagram at Modern Life Mystic Woman, where we're sharing inspirational writing and magical lifestyle tips on the daily.
And if you loved this show, let us know. Subscribe, comment, shoot us a DM, you know, whatever your style, and make sure to share it with all your spiritual besties.
See you next time.